Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Jean-Daniel Ruch, and he comes obviously from Switzerland, a country famous for chocolates, watches, and diplomats. Jean-Daniel is one of the finest of Swiss diplomats, so we have a top quality product from Switzerland today to expound on one of the most compelling issues of our times. It is the recognition of Palestine by an increasing number of Western countries and the implications of this latest development. Jean-Daniel, welcome.
Thank you very much, Atul. It's a pleasure to be back on your show.
Thank you, sir. Now, Jean-Daniel, a lot of countries have recognized a Palestinian statehood in the past. Some new ones have recently recognized Palestine as a state. What are these new ones, and why is it such a big deal?
Well, I think it's mostly a big deal because there is a huge communication campaign from those states about that particular issue. And it seems to me that putting ahead the fact that you recognize or that you may recognize Palestine is a way not to address the real issue that hurt, and that would hurt Israel if those measures would be implemented. Like stopping any sort of communication, trade, relation with the illegal settlements, colonies in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. Like stopping any sort of financial flow into the military industry or intelligence industry in Israel, which may contribute directly or indirectly to the commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and maybe genocide in Gaza. And a number of other measures that those Western states could take to put real pressure on Israel to implement its legal obligations. So I think this is sort of a tree which is hiding the forest of the measures that could be taken that would have a real impact. I don't think that threatening the recognition of Palestine or even recognizing it may have any sort of strong impact on the current dramatic, tragic, horrible situation that we face in the Palestinian occupied territories.
So, very quickly, it's performative, not substantive. That is the core of your argument.
That's the core of my argument. I wouldn't say it has zero impact. It has psychological impact, it has symbolic impact, and it has some sort of a political impact. But I don't think that it will change the behavior. If the willingness is to change the behavior of Israel, I think this is not the right means. It will not change the behavior of Israel today in the West Bank and in Gaza. I believe that what the people want, really what the Western public certainly wants, and most of the governments, is to see a stop to the bloodshed, to the killing of civilians, to the starving of civilians of Gaza, and maybe even the worst things that may come, which would amount to ethnic cleansing and maybe genocide. I think what people want to see is an end to the settlement enterprise in the West Bank, which is making the two-state solution impossible. But I don't think that with those means you will reach that result.
Some argue that the two-state settlement is already utopian. It's never going to happen. It's impossible because of facts on the ground, because so many settlements are there now in West Bank, and the settlers are aggressive, and the Israeli state has far-right parties that will never allow any government to pull out settlements from West Bank. And also Ariel Sharon pulled out settlements from Gaza, and Gaza became a Hamas fiefdom. So the die is cast. What do you say to that?
Well, precisely, this is the fairy tale that we seem to be hearing from the states that were in New York from 28 to 30 July to reaffirm the validity of the two-state solution, because when you look at the situation of the ground, it's almost unthinkable that a viable, contiguous Palestinian state could be created because of what is happening in Gaza and because of the colonization in the West Bank. But still, we seem to live with this utopia. Now, and the fact that an increasing number of people, I think we had in 2024 6 European states that recognize the state of Palestine. France has said, like Portugal and I think Malta and San Marino, that they are going to recognize in September. The UK has said that they would recognize also in September unless a certain number of conditions are met. And those conditions, we don't see the beginning of the implementation of any of these conditions. It's about ceasefire. It's about humanitarian access. It's about setting a path, a process that would lead to the creation of a Palestinian state. We don't see anything like that. So we see an increasing number of states which are recognizing Palestine. But again, I don't see how in practice this could be implemented. It would require an incredible investment of political capital by the major states in this world, mainly Europe, but also the United States, on Israel, to allow for this Palestinian state to be created. And as we know, the Knesset, the parliament of Israel, has voted a law, has put in law last year that there will never be any Palestinian state. So Israel is actually one of the very few states on the planet, I think with Iran probably. These are the only two states who do not want a Palestinian state. So, okay. But we continue, we lived with this kind of utopia. And if those states who are recognizing Israel now would really mean it, then they would take other types of measures which would really have an impact on the Israeli behavior. And these are not these declaratory measures that we see.
So very quickly, our viewers should know that you were ambassador to Israel. You know Israel very well. The other thing that you didn't mention, which I asked you to, was the names of states. So I'll do that. France is one, UK is another, Canada and Australia. These are some of the prominent states that have promised to recognize Palestine. It has provoked a massive reaction amongst the Israelis. Some of them say this is a reward for Hamas. Hamas has been rewarded for its October 7, 2023 attacks. There is no movement amongst the Palestinian leadership for peace. And this is a terrible precedent for the future. What do you say to the Israeli reaction?
I think that if the goal of the Israeli government would be to neutralize the Hamas, to create a ceasefire, to create the conditions for peace in the region, to have the return of the hostages, then they would have implemented the ceasefire negotiated by Biden and sort of forced upon Israel in January of this year, and then abandoned by the Israeli government in March. But let's not forget that one of the first acts of the Trump administration, actually even before he was inaugurated, was to sort of put pressure on this Netanyahu government to abide by a ceasefire, which was divided into 3 phases. And at the end of the 3rd phase, all those hostages held by Hamas would have been liberated. And there would be prisoners released by Palestinian prisoners released in exchange. And thirdly, there would be a permanent ceasefire and a withdrawal of the Israeli forces, which would have set the path for reconstruction of Gaza, for reconstruction of a credible, decent, and law-abiding Palestinian leadership. And there was an Arab plan that was drafted about at the same time, which was providing for both a physical reconstruction of Gaza, 50 billion was the figure that was mentioned, and also for the political reconstruction of the Palestinian camp. I do believe that this whole mess is the result of the international community. I know it's a bit of a big world, but I'm including there the West, I'm including there the Security Council, I'm including there the Arab world. They have left the situation rot for a much too long time. Let's not forget, if we go to the genesis of the horrible actions of the Palestinian factions on 7 October 2023.
The Hamas attacks in which they ruthlessly killed and kidnapped people.
Yeah, and more than that, also tortured, and there was sexual mistreatment and so on. This was not only Hamas, by the way. That's why I really mentioned Palestinian factions. You had Islamic Jihad, but then you had a whole lot of small criminal groups which were not under the direct command of Hamas that took advantage of this carnage. But at the genesis, you have the elections in Palestine, the only elections which were recognized as democratic by the UN and by the European Union in 2006, that eventually brought Hamas to power in Gaza. And since 2007, actually, Gaza is under a very tight siege. Very difficult for people to go out or in, very difficult to do any sort of trade, therefore very difficult to bring in any sort of investment and develop any sort of economic activity. This blockade has been lasting since 2007. So we are, 18 years into a blockade, which has also created a cut in practice between Gaza and the West Bank, so a divided leadership. This has been encouraged actually by the Israeli government, which has even allowed for years Qatar to bring in $30 million into Gaza so as to sort of purchase a calm. And this has been more or less working until 7 October. And we can talk about the reasons why Hamas launched this crazy offensive that led to so much bloodshed and to so much suffering also for the Palestinian people. But the fact is that we have left a situation rot for almost 20 years. And this is actually the root cause that have made it today almost unthinkable that a two-state solution, which is the basis of a resolution of the conflict, which has been voted by the Security Council since 1967 and Resolution 242, this has been made unthinkable today because of a lack of action of the world in front of a situation which was rotting and which naturally led, in a way, to the current situation. So, you know, the conflict has not started on the 7th of October, but it's like that in any historical event. You can also talk about Ukraine, for instance. Yeah. Everything is the result of a kind of process. Yeah. And in this kind of processes, the situation suddenly reaches a tipping point. And maybe the tipping point in October 2023 were a combination of three things. The first one, there was you could see a radicalization within Hamas. You know, I've been dealing with those people in the early 2010, and there was a group of leaders of Hamas in those days who really wanted to be recognized, to get some kind of respectability within the Western world. And this is why they drafted a kind of new constitution, a new document, which was published in 2017, and which you might say was compatible with a two-state solution, because the key statement there was, we agreed to live in a Palestinian state in the borders of 1967, which has always been the basis for the two-state solution in
Exactly.
the UN document.
Exactly. I mean,
And they said that,
1967 has been that cutoff line for the peace process.
yes. And 2017, they issued this document.
Just very quickly for our viewers, 1967 is the Six-Day War.
Yes.
To get the context, that is when Israel beats its neighbors, all of whom attack, and takes over East Jerusalem, takes over West Bank. Until then, it was with Jordan. It also beats Egypt, Syria, everyone else. And 67 basically, arguably, even according to Israeli historians, removes the existential challenge to Israel. From now on, Israel is the dominant military power in the region. Over to you, Jean-Daniel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can say that. So, and ever since 1967, there is a call from the United Nations to have a peace based on the end of the occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, and in exchange, the Arab states and Palestine would accept to recognize the state of Israel. This is also the basis of the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which is proposing exactly that: end of the occupation, creation and recognition of a Palestinian state, and in exchange, normalization of a diplomatic and trade relationship with Israel. Now, what happens in 2017 is that Hamas is sort of slowly aligning itself with this position of the Arabs, of the rest of the Arab world. And this major concession from the Hamas point of view is being rejected by the Israeli government and is being ignored by the West and by the rest of the international community. The result is a process of radicalization of Hamas, where those hot heads, starting with Yahya Sinwar, are taking the lead and becoming the dominant factor within Hamas. So I think that's the first factor that may explain the 7th October. The second factor, so basically those hotheads are those who are saying, forget these kind of concessions. What we want at the end of the day is to reconquer the whole of historical Palestine, so from the river to the sea. And these are the guys who are taking the lead now. Then the second factor is that in 2022 to beginning of 2023, there were lots of noises that Saudi Arabia was on the verge of normalizing its diplomatic relations with Israel. So that was after the Emirates, after Morocco, before that Jordan and Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the
also
major...
also Bahrain, Jean-Daniel.
Also Bahrain.
Yeah.
But Saudi Arabia is, of course, the major Arab power, and the major Arab power...
Custodian of the holy sites, Mecca and Medina.
Yeah, and the largest proven oil reserves in the world. So that would be a major shift, and that was perceived by Hamas as the end of the dream of a Palestinian state if Saudi Arabia would leave its traditional position, saying, since 2002, we have said in the Arab Peace Initiative, which was a Saudi idea, we are going to recognize Israel when there is a Palestinian state. So Saudi Arabia was ready to join the so-called Abraham Accords in these days, and I think Hamas wanted to prevent that from happening with this operation. And then maybe there is a third element that with Ukraine, with many other conflicts and issues in the world, the Palestinian issues had totally disappeared from the international agenda. And the result, I don't know if it was intended or not, but certainly the result of this action was that the Palestinian issue, which was forgotten somewhere, became again the number one issue in international relations with China, US relations, with Ukraine, obviously. But this is an issue of which everybody is talking every day in the world media. And that was, so I think these were the sort of three issues that you can say were the the root causes and the immediate causes of the operation of 2023.
Well, I mean, Jake Sullivan had famously, that hapless Jake Sullivan, who probably, unfortunately never got anything right, said the Middle East had never been more peaceful. And he was right. He was right in that moment. But
Yeah,
then,
but this, I think the problem with most Western leaders is that they don't have the depth of historical understanding.
well, he was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, and he's never been a diplomat. He's never been a soldier. He's never been a spy. So he had
Yeah,
no
but he,
dirt under his fingernails. He came from the world of political campaigning and parachuted at the top.
yeah, but still, he was a foreign affairs advisor to Biden for a very long time. Also, when he was vice president. So anyway, I don't know. I don't want to judge those people. But having been in Israel in May 2021, when we had 10 days of Hamas rockets versus Israelis bombings of Gaza, and if you look at the whole frequency of the exchanges of fire between Gaza and Israel, I think it should have been obvious to everybody, even not a fine connoisseur of the region, that the situation was not prone to a long-term stability, because only the satisfaction of the Palestinian aspirations to self-determination connected to security guarantees, foolproof security guarantees to Israel by the whole neighbors, would bring a long-term calm in the region. And it was foolish to think that this situation was stable, because simply Israel is stronger, Israel is using force, and the survival of Israel has been depending since its creation to shows of force and to military superiority over its neighbors. And it has been working, but how long can it work? Can it work if the Americans one day decide, like they seem to decide in Ukraine today, okay, finished with foreign wars, we're not interested to support Israel anymore? We don't see that as very likely soon. But who knows? Huh? We had not thought either 2 years ago that suddenly the Americans would throw Ukraine under the bus. And you might say, we are going into such a situation.
Jean-Daniel, I thought they would throw Ukraine under the bus from day one. I think Americans are known to have attention deficit disorder when it comes to foreign policy. And one day they just decide it's over. Look at the way they left Afghanistan in a hurry, in a huff, with scenes of chaos. Look at the way, if we go back to Vietnam, the way they left Vietnam. The scenes were, I wouldn't say identical, but similar. So,
Yeah, but still, we, at least, I'm speaking from a Western European point of view, still we think to trust the Americans that they will always protect us, and look at the behavior of the European leaders. They have this trust into America to provide for their security.
well, they showed up as courtiers in the court of, in the Grand Palace of the great King Donald Trump. So that was quite hilarious. But let's get back to the
No,
topic.
but if I may, because everything is connected, I don't think you can really isolate what's going on in the Middle East from what's going on elsewhere. And I think the Europeans, for them, leaving Afghanistan, who cares? Afghanistan is far away. Even Iraq is far away. Vietnam is far away. But they had this kind of naive belief that Europe is different, because we are the same civilization, we are the world of Western democracies, and they thought that Europe would be different.
Christendom, same race, same culture, the idea of the West, all of that.
Yeah, there is an ideological dimension, or you can call it civilizational, which is very strong. But not only that, you look at the trade links. I mean, still today, the main trade or financial connections are still not between the US and Asia. It's still between the US and Europe's, plus the military presence, plus the legacy of World War II,
Exactly.
all that made us so confident that we could always live under an American umbrella, that we can trust America. I hope that this conviction now is being shaken, and as a result that Europe will care for its own security autonomously, strategic autonomy, as Macron is saying, but that this will also include an independent, autonomous European policy towards the Middle East. Because if Gaza explodes, or if Gazans are being kicked out one way or another, expelled, as some members of the Israeli government are saying, they are not going to go to America. It's pretty far away. They are not going to go to Saudi Arabia or to Russia and China. I mean, the first destination will be Egypt, and from Egypt, where will they go? You know, there is a story that I have told already, so it's not a secret anymore, but not many people have heard it. Shortly after the 7th of October 2023, like 1 month after, I received a phone call from a friend I have, who is a sort of influential member of Likud. Likud is the party of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, just for our viewers, Likud is supposedly the center-right party historically, and it is a party that was headed in the past by luminaries like Ariel Sharon, by Menachem Begin, all of these leaders. And Bibi Netanyahu is the Likud leader, has been the Likud leader for 2 decades or more.
Exactly. So this person is calling me, saying, Jean-Daniel, now is the moment. We will finally manage to do what we always wanted to do. These Palestinians cannot live next to us. They will always be in a difficult position. They cannot live happily next to us, and we don't want them there because they represent an existential threat. So now is the time we are going to empty Gaza of its population, and then we'll move to the West Bank. Now we understand Egypt and Jordan, they cannot absorb 2 million Palestinians from Gaza. We need to find other countries. So, Jean-Daniel, we have thought 75,000 for Switzerland. What do you think? 75,000. How many Syrians do you have? How many Ukrainians? 75,000 Palestinians. It's okay for you. No? Of course, I advised him against making that request or recommendation to our government. That would not be very popular, not very good for Israel. So he did not do it. But that tells a lot about the thinking in the ruling circles in Israel.
So I have another story. So I ran into an Israeli, not from the more secular intelligence special forces. They tend to be more reasonable, ironically.
Oh yeah.
So the people I meet, the Mossad, the Seret Matkal, the Yalom, even the diplomats, they're largely secular and reasonable. But when you meet these religious nutters from the religious parties, you accidentally run into them. One of them said, look, more people, more Jews lost their land in Arab countries than the entire area of Israel combined, because the Arab countries just took over the land, seized the properties after 1948, seized the wealth. And so the Arab countries can take back the Gazans and their fellow Palestinians in West Bank. And in any case, this is the holy land of Israel. I demurred. I said, and how do you propose to achieve this? And they said, well, we are the strongest military in the world, and we'll just push them and push them and push them until they pack up and leave.
Mm-hmm. That's it. In legal terms, this is called genocide. Because this fits perfectly.
Ethnic cleansing more than genocide. He's not killing them. He's not talking of killing them.
There is no legal definition of ethnic cleansing. So if we look into the legal qualification, of what they
You're
are
the
doing
diplomat,
now.
you know more.
Yes, well, I work for the Yugoslavia War Crimes
Yeah,
Tribunal, where we had one case of genocide, the genocide of Srebrenica.
yeah.
And I don't want to make a course of international law here, but basically, what is a genocide?
Hmm.
Genocide is the eradication of a population or part of a population based on race, ethnicity, religion. Uh, and there are a number of examples of what you can do. It's not killing everybody. This is the Holocaust is a pretty extreme type of
Example.
genocide. But you can have Srebrenica. They didn't kill everybody. They killed the man, and the Serbs killed a Bosnian Muslim man,
Hmm.
and they sent the women to some other place. So they didn't kill everybody, but they emptied a region from its Muslim presence. And
Hmm.
what they want to do there is to empty. And they say it. There is an intention, because what is an important, very important factor to define whether it's a genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity is the intention.
Hmm.
And we have now ample evidence from ministers' statements that they want to empty from the Palestinians. Now, one more point, in the jurisprudence of the Yugoslavia War Crimes Tribunal, there is the notion that as part of the genocide, there must be also violence and crimes and murders in numbers. So massive violations of international humanitarian law. Now you have 62,000 who have died in Gaza. You have a situation of starvation today, which is organized by the Israeli government because they don't allow enough humanitarian aid, which would be available. And then, if you look at the proportion of civilians, especially children, against combatants killed, it's extremely high. So I think there is really a case to make for a genocide, unfortunately, in Gaza today.
So, very quickly, I want to draw attention to Alan Waring, his masterpiece on Fair Observer, which chronicles in detail all the pronouncements of Israeli leaders and makes a case similar to yours. Of course, we also have Joseph Olmert, whom I interview regularly, the brother of Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister, who makes the case, who's not exactly pro Bibi Netanyahu, but who makes the case that Israel is exhibiting restraint and the Israeli military is trying its best not to kill civilians, but the civilians are collateral casualties. The goal is to eliminate Hamas. So we have a range of views on this issue. It is a divisive issue, but the point about the pronouncements of Israeli leaders, even Joseph Olmert accepts that these leaders are irresponsible, are nutters, his words, not mine, and
Yeah.
are damaging Israel.
And at the end of the day, if a children loses both his legs, doesn't matter whether it's in the context of a genocide, a war crime, or just war. I mean, this is a tragedy, and we have today 17,000 children who have been killed, and an undisclosed number who have been hurt, maimed.
Mhm.
So I think that this whole discussion about genocide, not genocide, maybe it's important, but maybe it's not so important. What would be really important is to put a stop to this bloodshed and reach a ceasefire. And there is a ceasefire on the table that Hamas has accepted now. And we are waiting for the response of the government, but it seems that the government wants to send more troops.
The troops have entered Gaza City. They have summoned up thousands of reservists, probably over 60,000. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's what I've heard also. Yeah.
Yeah. And importantly, that brings us back to the topic we were discussing. So, what does recognition of Palestinian statehood even mean? In the short run, it means nothing from what you imply, it is performative. But in the long run, What does it mean? Because Israelis are alarmed by it.
There are some optimistic people. Now, I think it's hard for me to imagine how they can be optimistic because right now Israel is taking two steps which I think would really make the situation irreversible, or the impossibility of a Palestinian state irreversible. The one is to push the population of Gaza City out of Gaza City and to create a kind of mass camp in the remote corner of Gaza that would allow them to level everything and rebuild with probably settlements. And the other one is that they have taken decisions to create the famous E1 settlements, which would cut the West Bank into two. And these are all very new decisions from the last days. And this famous E1, this has been on the map since the Sharon times. You mentioned Sharon. And each and every American government had to fight and put a lot of pressure on Israel ever since the Sharon days to say, you do not do it because it's the end of the two-state solution. Now there is no US government who is ready to do that.
Yeah. American governments have been uneasy for a very long time with illegal settlements in the West Bank. They have criticized it. They have in private remonstrated with their Israeli counterparts, but they have never really done anything substantive.
The last one who has done something was George W. Bush. Mind you, yes. Many people do criticize him and for the right reasons because of Iraq.
Yeah.
But on Israel, he was the last one, I think, who had sort of the guts to put enough pressure.
Yes.
And
Obama yielded. Barack Obama hated Bibi Netanyahu. That's an open secret that we know from people who served in the White House. But he always wilted under Bibi's pressure. He got outplayed. He got played and outplayed by Bibi.
He's the one who has signed the largest military aid program to Israel of the history, $38 billion over 10 years. But George W. Bush had managed to get a commitment, a letter, whereby the Israelis committed themselves to build settlements only as part of the natural growth of existing settlements. And those settlements, according to the two-state, let's say, models or projects, like the Geneva Initiative on which I work, which is probably the most detailed model of a two-state solution, these large settlement blocks, like Ma'ale Adumim, like Ariel, would in any event have become part of Israel as part of land swaps. So this George W. Bush idea to have natural growth would not have had, let's say, a killing impact on the two-state solution. Now, as I said before, there are some people who say that if there is a ceasefire, if there is a reconstruction of Gaza, if there is a reconstitution of a unified Palestinian leadership, of which Hamas would obviously be excluded, if there would be a halt to the settlement enterprise, the two-state solution would still be possible. And if there would be a total change of mind in the Israeli government, it makes so many ifs, because the main obstacle then would be the religious settlers or the violent settlers. Now, they made some calculations based on polls, which are dating back to like first quarter of 2024, so it's not so old. And according to those polls that I have studied, they came to the conclusion that actually out of the 600,000 or so settlers that you have in the West Bank, only 10 to 15,000 are really ideological settlers who are ready to violence and who would fight the army or even the Israeli forces if they would try to dislodge them from their settlement. But the vast majority are there for economic reasons, because the Israeli government is subsidizing you heavily if you go and live in a settlement. And most of the people who live in those settlements, they are there because you have larger apartments, you have better conditions to raise your children, the prices of everything are lower. You have very good infrastructure. So actually you live well in those settlements, and you don't see the Arabs usually. You don't see the Palestinians because there are walls everywhere, and so you live among yourselves.
So
Now,
life is good.
if you give the same economic conditions and social conditions to those people, the vast majority, in Israel proper, then they will
There's
move back.
space. Is there space for them?
Well, as we, there is this cliche that Israel is very good at making the desert bloom. So I think there are still large spaces in Israel proper where they could create space for those people. So I think that should not be said. That's not the big problem. But the big problem is to come to the political will and to a political realignment, both in Israel and in the Palestinian territories under the Palestinian Authority. Now, as I told you, I just don't see a path towards this sort of huge political changes on both camps. And by the way, Hamas has proven even yesterday that they are still capable of carrying out operations which are not such easy operations against Israeli forces. So
Hamas is now popular in West Bank, not just Gaza.
Well, if you put yourself in the mind of the Palestinians who have been going through loss of land, most of the time stolen from them, through humiliation. I have seen how you move when you are a worker and you work in Israel, mostly in the construction, as used to be the case before 2023. What kind of humiliation you have to go through, or at the airport when you enter Israel, and just because you have a sort of Arab face or an Arab name on your passport, even if you are a Swiss citizen or an American citizen. So they have faced decades of humiliation, of oppression, of repression, and what they see is that the only movement that has been trying to resist and to give some pride to the Palestinian people are the Hamas. It's sadly so. That reminds me, in a way, in the situation of the Jews during the terrible days of the Holocaust. I have met many Jews when I was in Israel, including survivors of the Holocaust, who had sort of a guilty feeling because they did not resist. And many of the Holocaust survivors never wanted to tell their story, even to their children, because they felt bad not to have resisted and revolted against the Nazi oppression, repression, and killing and Holocaust. And another thing is that many of these Jews, they were looked down by the Jewish population who was already in Israel before the Holocaust, because they sort of despised them, because you were like sheep. You were like sheep going to the butcher, and you allowed that to happen without revolting. It's sort of hard to say, but I think that those feelings, we should have revolted. We were wrong. We had this guilty feeling that you found among some survivors. This you have also maybe among some Palestinians who think, by God's sake, they are stealing our land, they are expelling us, and we are also like sheep, accepting that. So those who are resisting this are seen as sort of heroes, or they have a lot of support, even though the consequence for most Palestinians is more suffering, more repression, more stealing more ceding of land. But I think there is some sort of psychological mechanism about the notion of what is our identity. Can I be proud of my identity?
Now, you've raised some very important issue, and let's take a step further. There's a radicalization amongst the Palestinians. We've seen that over decades. Out is the secular leadership, Fatah initially, the armed wing of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Yasser Arafat's party was socialist, really. And in fact, they were supported by the Soviet Union. They were supported by Indira Gandhi, who hugged Yasser Arafat. She was running socialist India. And the move happened within Palestinian territories as the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union collapsed, and as the peace process collapsed, the Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin process, you've had the move to the right. Now, in Israel itself, there are 20% Arabs. Let's not forget that. A fifth of the population is Arab. And an increasing number of Jews are religious Jews who are not exactly like the secular Jews who served in the military, who served in intelligence, who were the torchbearers of the young Israeli state. So Israel itself is really divided. Israel itself, many people, many Israelis fear, is on the verge of a civil war. So how does that play out in this very, very, very volatile and combustible situation?
I would say yes and no. On the one hand, yes, the Jewish community of Israel, which is somewhere between 7.5 and 8 million people, compared to the Palestinian population of Israel, which is a bit less than 2 million people, the Jewish Israeli population has really very different, not just trends, but communities. The ultra-Orthodox community, very religious, but not to be mixed with the nationalist religious communities, which are mostly in the settlements, which are very ideological. The others are very religious. It's a little bit different. The ultra-Orthodox are those who refuse to serve in the army, for instance. And they are representing the largest demographic growth within the population. So by the year 2050 or maybe 2060, if the current trends continue, 50%, between 40 and 50% of the population of Israel of today, will be composed by ultra-Orthodox Jews who are not working,
right?
and Palestinians.
Yeah, the Haredis, right?
Well, they are not only Haredim, you have also several branches, but let's make it easy. The people in black, if you want. who are mostly...
Hamas also dresses in black. Both of them dress in black.
Well, no, I think the ultra-Orthodox will recognize them because they always have this kind of uniform, which was invented in Eastern Europe in the 19th century to look normal, so that people don't notice you. Well, but they keep the same kind of uniforms today. So I think we should not mix those with the religious settlers who are dressed differently, who are prone to violence, and who are also increasingly taking command positions in the army. And I think that's a worry you have, because traditionally the key positions in the army were filled by more Ashkenazi secular Jews, which were more labor or center left, let's say. But this is changing very rapidly, which is certainly not certainly not a good sign.
I mean, just for our viewers, we should just give them a bit of context, Jean-Daniel, before we move forward. That in 1948, a lot of the leaders in Israel were center left. David Ben-Gurion came up with a government and the founding father, or in a way, of Israel that was influenced very much by the social democracies of Europe. Even though Israel had been a British colony, Palestine had been a British colony, the immigration from Europe brought with them the proportional representation system, the center-left ideas, the idea of kibbutzim, the plural for collective farms, kibbutz, which is the singular for a collective farm, And until there were economic reforms and massive liberalization, LPG liberalization, privatization, globalization, Israel was really a socialist country. And initially, Israel wasn't exactly as close to the US as today. Now Israel is a startup nation. Now Israel is a powerful market economy. Now it has companies, sorry, like EBIT, if I'm forgetting, that are doing really well. The stock market is doing really well. But that was not always the case. So the Ashkenazi elite that founded Israel and that commanded that occupied the commanding heights of the Israeli state, the Mossad, the IDF, even other institutions like the central bank, they were of a center left orientation. Over to you, Jean-Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, you can even go one step further and say that the pioneers, the very first immigrants from Eastern Europe, it was mostly Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
And they came there with communist ideas, actually with Marxist ideas.
True.
And no property, even the children were raised in common in the middle of the kibbutz. There was like the building for the children and so on. So you can say that a kibbutz is a kolkhoz or a sovkhoz that is working. And there are still some who are working according to this principle: no private property, everything belongs to the kibbutz.
Yeah, they didn't work in the Soviet Union, but they worked in Israel.
Exactly. So you have this which is still existing. Now it's of course a small minority, but it is still there. And you're absolutely right. The first supporter of Israel that led to the independence was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union thought mistakenly that they could make a kind of satellite state of the Soviet Union there and then have access to the Mediterranean Sea and so on. But then, of course, everything changed. But what I wanted to say, I think my main message compared to what you say, is I know that it's sort of trendy to say that Israel may implode, that there may be a civil war because of these very deep divisions within the society. But I continue to sense it's really more of an intuition than something I could prove by A plus B. But my sense is that there is a cement, which is not just the fact that they are all Jews, which is connecting, which is creating a sense of community, even between the ultra-Orthodox, the leftist startup guys on the coast of Tel Aviv. I think there is still a cement in this society, simply
a binding force, a mortar that holds that.
Yes, and maybe the most important mortar is this very strong desire that Israel survives. And they know that they are confronted to an internal threat, but even more so to an external threat. Even though they have accords, agreements with most Arab states, either formal or sort of informal, we see that Saudi Arabia is not really, nobody is helping Hamas, actually, only Iran, and they are far away. So, but they still, I don't think they trust that those Arab states will forever be on the side of Israel or tolerate Israel. They know that their survival is not yet guaranteed to these days. Imagine if there would be a revolution in Egypt or Saudi Arabia and some Muslim brothers would come back to power. Then they would feel again under threat, because the populations of the Arab world, they are fed by Al Jazeera, they are fed by Al Jazeera is sort of a mild media outlet, but you have many more, or in the mosques, which are extremely violent, and they know that the populations, they are not necessarily tuned with their government and their behavior.
So one of my friends, he's ex-MI6, and he's an Arabist, speaks Arabic, knows the region quite well. And he said, look, the Arab Palace and the Arab Street, the gulf is getting wider and deeper with every passing day. And in some ways, Israel is a modern-day crusader state and should a modern day Saladin appear in the Arab world, things could get really iffy very quickly. There was a Gamal Abdel Nasser, a pan Arabist from Egypt, who caused Israel a lot of problems. Thankfully, he was not as strategic and as competent. He wasn't a great military commander. But the very existence of Israel is perilous. It is not as smooth sailing as it may
No.
seem.
No, I agree with you. And I heard people who were not Hamas, who were secular Palestinians, of course, who had lost land, who had sort of suffered from the creation of Israel. And they were telling me with a lot of calm, of inner calm, saying, well, it took us 200 years to get rid of the Crusaders. We still have like 120 years left.
Yeah, I've heard that too, on multiple occasions from Arabs from multiple countries and Palestinians themselves.
Yes. So this fear for the survival of the state will remain somewhere present. I think that what the Hamas operation of October 7 has triggered is that those existential fears came back to the surface. And that's why the massive retaliation operation of the Israelis still meets the consent of a vast majority of the population in Israel, despite demonstrations. I think the only thing that is feeding the opposition to the Netanyahu, it's in my view, totally disproportionate operations, is the fact that people care for the hostages. You still have about 50, probably 49 hostages, out of which maybe somewhere around half of them are still alive, maybe less. And I think this is what is sort of cementing this opposition to Netanyahu, and which is feeding those demonstrators. I mean, you have massive demonstrations in Israel today against Netanyahu for all sorts of reasons. But the common denominator between all those people is the fate of them, of their sons. I'm not sure if there are still some women who are being held, but of their citizens who are in the hands of Hamas.
So, I mean, the upshot of our discussion is that Israel still has that existential fear, and therefore it is acting disproportionately. Palestinians are far too divided, and also Palestinians, both in Gaza and West Bank, are under pressure from Israeli military forces. And so, as of now, a Palestinian statehood is an impossibility, and Western countries are using that to pressure Israel, and it's more of a fig leaf and to detract from the fact that they don't want to take, or they can't take, substantive actions against Israel.
No, I think this is exactly this is a wonderful summary of all of our discussion. Yes.
All right. Well, Jean-Daniel, always a pleasure. We'll have you back again, and thank you very much for your time.
Always a pleasure, Atul, even when we talk about really tragic circumstances. And what I see in Gaza is the most tragic things that I have witnessed in my life.
Well, here's to the ending of suffering and to peace. And hopefully we'll soon talk about more cheerier things.
I hope so too, Atul. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.